I'd say around year 2 is when it shifted to like everything being about my spirituality and knowing that everything that I have, good, bad, or indifferent, is a direct result of my higher power. And it's all a blessing. The scales of justice have finally equaled out, meaning that I've been blessed with such a beautiful life that it's absolutely terrifying for me to think that I could easily revert back to. But with this awareness that I possess, I understand it's the behavioral patterns, right? So it's something I focus on.
It is crazy. I wish there was somebody that could explain to us, because I feel like a lot of us who are in recovery and have gone through, the trenches, you know what I mean? Just some really hardcore crazy stories, and live such a beautiful life. Like it's unreal a lot of times. Like I sit here and just think like, how was somebody who was so strung out on drugs able to be so successful and, center themselves to focus on nutrition and health, fitness, all of those things, like just a complete turnaround. Like it's hard to explain to some people who have never been in our situation, who do good about eating right, going to the gym, and they go through, I don't want to say little life struggles. Everyone goes through struggles that are strong for them. But for us, some dark places.
For sure. And you're right. I didn't understand any of this until I understood it. And the most beautiful part about this process is I just simply dumbed my way into it. Right. And I always talk about, I kind of came into sobriety as a king, and I worked my way up the ladder to become a humble servant. Right. It's such a contradiction of how I thought life was supposed to be lived. And it all derived from pain. Right? A really bad, dark, deep place. And I around and did the worst thing I could have ever done for my life. I bought into the process. And in buying into the process, I started to acquire this knowledge, this information, meaning that I could no longer roam around this world ignorant to the fact that there is a better way. And unfortunately, I am my problem and the common denominator in all of my problems. And if I just maybe get the out of my way and surround myself with some genuine, like-minded people who sincerely want to see me be the best version of me, however that may look, without any expectations of who I should be or the direction they think I'm headed in. And all they did was they allowed me to do this at my own pace, at my own willingness, from consequences of my own reactions, that created enough motivation to find some willingness and say, you know what, let's do this. And in doing that, I acquired this like godlike conscience, right? So now, even despite how I may feel about somebody or what I want to do in a particular situation, I'm not even capable of doing those things, because it will, require me to revert back to the guy I was before having this transformation, right? And what happened was I had a spiritual experience, and the definition of a spiritual experience is simply a psychic change, which means I've been completely rewired. So I, Brandon Novak, today, with coming up on 9 years sober, no longer look or think about things the way I did when I came in that position of pain, holding on to a seat at a 12-step meeting for my life because I had to be there. And today, I want to be there, and I love to be there, and I get to go there, and I don't have to get there to save my life anymore. Right?
That spiritual awakening, do you feel like that was just like a boom, aha moment, and you had an awakening, or do you feel like it was a process over, your last situation that got you sober?
It was a process throughout the whole journey. Going back to what you were talking about before, having this, caring about health and your body and wanting to take care of it to live a longer life. That wasn't who I was. I literally did whatever with whomever, wherever. For the better part of like 20 years, my life was like spring break on steroids, methamphetamine, Adderall, like any, speed. And then I'd gotten sober, but I was in that place of pain that derived this outcome, literally. And I was willing to do whatever they suggested. I didn't know if I was done. I had no idea if I was finished. I just knew that I didn't want to feel how I felt anymore. And they said, well, if you eat better, you'll feel better. And in detox, where most people just rely and depend on shoving as much sugar down their throat as possible, I was in such a place of pain that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to cut out the juices. I'm going to drink the water. Just the simple that was always suggested to me along the way that didn't make sense until it made sense. And then I bought into the process. I had acquired a sponsor. We began to work the steps. And none of that made sense to me. 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. And until I was on my 8th step and I had to revert back, which was making a list of the amends that I was going to have to make. But I had to revert back to the 3rd step where I had turned my will and my over to a God of understanding, because I had lied to my parole officer. And I was in detox, and he had reached out and he said, my therapist called me to her office, your parole officer on the phone, and he'd like to speak with you. We get him on the phone and he says, Novak, I have 2 questions to ask you, and just know that if you're lying, it's probably one of the worst lies anyone's ever told to me, and I will violate you. And I said, oh, well, what is it? And I'm in treatment and I feel great, and I know that things are going to be different. But I know not to say that because I'm the boy that cried wolf so many times, despite how much I believe like my life was going to change. Unfortunately, not even unfortunately, the reality was I wasn't willing to do what was required in order to achieve those results. So I'm in this treatment center, and he calls and he said, number 1, I've heard that you've been spotted in bars around Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is where I was living at the time with Bam. And I'm like, no, not at all. I'm in treatment. I can have letters. You can talk to my therapist. And he said, number 2, did your mother die? Because prior to going to treatment the last time I was in Baltimore, the stipulations for my parole is I was not supposed to leave Pennsylvania. I was supposed to be clean and sober. I was supposed to report to his office to produce these clean urines. And the reality was I was in Baltimore. I was on a crazy heroin and cocaine bender. And if I would have pissed into that cup, it would have lit up like a Christmas tree. And he called me while I was in Baltimore, and he said, hey, I need you to come in to give urine. And my mother, who's the most important person in the world to me, I thought about it, and I was trying to figure out a way to buy some time, and I'll never forget it. And I just shot a really big speedball, and even as out of my mind at the time that I knew that I was about to make a really bad decision. And I'm in her backyard and I'm pacing, and he got me on the phone, and I said, well, I'm in Baltimore because my mother just passed away, and I'm helping to make these funeral arrangements. And I knew in my heart of hearts that I just said something that I was going to regret. I would never wish that on the most important person, whatever. And he said, did your mother die? And I had worked the first 8 steps, right? But none of it made sense at this point in time. And I said, I wanted to say no, but he promised me, if you lied, I will have to violate you and you will go back to the penitentiary. No maybes, like stamped. And I said, yeah, she did. And he said, I'm going to need some proof of that. So I hang the phone up. My immediate next call is to my assistant, CJ. And I said, CJ, I need you to draft up an obituary. And he said, are you insane? That will never work. They will see right through this. And then the next call was to my sponsor, right? Like I didn't want to know the truth right away. So I had to kind of go through these layers. And I called Lex and I said, Lex, I'm terrified. He promised me that if I lied, it was the worst lie he'd ever heard. And 2, he was absolutely sending me back. And Lex, my sponsor, said, well, you've experienced the 3rd step. You've turned your will and your life over to a God of your understanding, right? I said, yeah. And he said, okay, well, here you go. God is everything or he's nothing. Number one. And number two, worst case scenario, he sends you back. That's where you're supposed to be, because someone in there who needs to hear your message that can't make it to you, you're going to make it to him. And I said, and this is on a Friday. I hang up with Lex. I say a prayer. I then call him back. And this guy's name is Matt Pfeiffer, my parole officer. His name is Matt Pfeiffer. His nickname is Max 'em Out Matt, right? He's the kind of guy, you spell your name wrong, he is going to, it's just the way he operated. And on a Friday, I called him back and I get his voicemail. He's gone. So what does that mean? I have to now sit through the weekend with this on my mind. Try telling that to an addict who's in treatment for the first 90 days and literally revolves his life around instant gratification, right? Like, and I swear to God, I'll never forget, I went back to where I was being housed in this particular facility, and I fell asleep, and I had slept sounder than I had slept since the day I admitted. And at that moment, I swear to God, at that moment, everything changed for me. And all of those steps that I had worked hit me like a ton of bricks. I call him, he calls back on Monday, and he said, I told him the truth. And he said, I need you to do me one thing. He said, I need you to promise me that you'll never lie to me again. And I said, I can promise you that as long as I'm sober, I will never lie to you again. And he said, deal. He never said he wasn't going to send or submit the violation paperwork. But what I can tell you today is that I am no longer on parole or probation. I was not violated. I never went back to the penitentiary. And that proved to me at that moment that God was real. Because I had never told the truth. And really like I'd tell the truth when my back was against the wall and you caught me and I was hoping to just buy some time. But that's when it like made sense. But still, I didn't really have this God-like conscience. I just kind of kept following through with the process because the pain was lessening, right? And I bought into it because I just didn't want to hurt as bad as I had hurt the day before. And now the pain's lessening. My days are getting better. Life's looking a little brighter. And still praying every morning, every night. And I'd say around year 2 is when it had shifted to like everything being about my spirituality and knowing that everything that I have, good, bad, or indifferent, is a direct result of my higher power. And it's all a blessing. But see, prior to getting to this point, I was so consumed by the mess that I was incapable of seeing the message. My brain was so convoluted to that now today, I know for a fact that my life was just full of a series of me continuously being divinely inconvenienced that have led to this outcome that is bright or as intelligent as I believe that I am. My feeble mind could never draft this.
That's crazy. I mean, I know a lot of, your stories and things. I didn't know that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I
usually when I'm giving talks, it's like in a public setting and they kind of want to hear the highlight, low life, but no one really, I don't ever generally get into like what my step work process looked like. Right.
I mean, and that's just, it's intense, I mean, what we try to do to cover up what we're doing is just, I tell people, if you take the smarts of what you do through your addiction, you'll be one hell of a successful person.
The behavioral patterns.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Because, I mean, you will jump through hoops and ladders to get away with what you're doing in your addiction. Things that are just like, no one can even wrap their mind around some of it, And when I was on probation, I was buying, pee from somebody and putting it in places that most people wouldn't expect by getting the little travel shampoo bottles and passing my tests. I mean, it's crazy. And they were on to me like, what is she doing? We know she's using, we know she's high, but they couldn't catch me, but just being so sick in those lies was just buying time. It's another day. It's another day. It's another day. And eventually it catches up to you. And the relief, I mean, I don't know about for you, but for me, the relief that I had when I finally knew that day was ending. And I was going to give it my all. I felt relief. I wish there was a picture of me with my head on the officer's shoulder and my hands cuffed behind my back. I wish that picture would have been 1,000 words, just by looking at it, because I was done. I was tired. I was exhausted, and I wanted change. And I'm thankful for that. In 9 years, that's crazy. When did I meet you? I think you had 4.
Yeah.
4 years at the time.
I talk about it with my clients all the time at my facility. And I say, and I never profess to have the answer. I don't. I got into this position because I simply did process of elimination backwards, right? And I had tried everything and I had failed so miserably for so long. And looking back, I recognized I was simply just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic, right? But my ship sank every goddamn time. And the last thing I tried, which was the first thing that worked. So I just kind of share from my place of experience and what my history looked like to create this present, which is exactly what it is. So I try to treat it like that. But nonetheless, I too would do these insane acts to what I believed at the time was getting over on and like walking away the winning participant in that match. But what I was doing is just prolonging my inevitable, and most importantly, lying to the most important person in the whole equation, which was me. Right? And then when I found myself in this strange world, like what at one point in time I thought was cult like treatment world and sober world, a gentleman told me one time, he said, Novak, procrastination is like masturbation. You only yourself. And I'm like, God damn it, I've been really good at myself for a long time. And so knowing that the behavioral pattern is the exact reason that creates whatever outcome I see you in. So if you're sitting in my facility and you're living in one of my sober houses and you're holding on to that chair for dear life, I can relate to all of those things. I share that. Like you can sit here and you can tell me anything you want, and I'm going to believe it. I don't have time to look into it or to really, process this and research and fact check that. And as a matter of fact, you don't need to say anything, and I'll tell you exactly how you're doing, right? Because it's the behavioral patterns, right? And it's impossible for me to use the very same brain that thought me into this problematic position to in turn then think myself out of it. It defies logic. It literally is impossible to do. So I'm a big believer if you just continue to bring the body, the mind will follow. Why? Because in bringing the body, you're changing the behavioral pattern, and sooner or later the mind's going to follow the body, and it's going to start to look, think, and more importantly react to life differently. Now that leaves me with a question. Would both of us having similar backgrounds of just constantly lying and trying to just buy time, with that came a lot of broken trust, especially like for me. I mean, I feel like what I still see with my clients is I could relate to, because I dealt with that for a long time. When I first got sober, my mom constantly questioning me, and really I was not doing anything, but it was, I remember wearing my hair on top of my head, in like a messy bun. That was like the biggest red flag for her. And she's like, are you using? And I'm like, no, why? Your hair, the way your hair is. And I'm like, the way my hair is? Like, what do you mean? Like, it's just up in a ponytail. Even till this day, we joke about it. And I'm coming up on 12 years, but I have my hair thrown up. She looks at me and is just like, Cheree, are you okay? It's very traumatic for her to see you and your hair up.
Totally. And, having to turn in receipts, at the time didn't have money. So it's like, having to trust that she was giving me $10 for a coffee was really going towards a coffee. For sure. And bring the receipt back and the change back. Of course. Yeah. And I had to understand, I knocked those trust blocks down, and I naturally had to build them back up. I find that that's very difficult for a lot of my clients going through the process, is being questioned when they aren't doing something. I mean, what advice do you have for clients who might be in those situations? Because that's, me, and that's kind of how I explain it, is you've knocked the trust blocks down. Naturally, you have to build them back up. But at the same time, I do understand when I do have those clients who are proud of themselves and they've been sober and, they are being questioned. Well, you took too long here. You were, were you drinking? And, all of those things. What advice do you have? Because I feel like that's a big question that I get a lot.
For sure. And what my life looked like prior to finding sobriety is I simply justified, minimized, and deflected the severity of my alcoholism day in and day out, right? And then upon buying into what sober people suggested I do to create an outcome like they had in this peaceful, serene life where they were no longer questioned about where they went, what they did, or whom they did it with. And I had to find it attractive in other ways, like, wow, he goes home and his wife or girlfriend doesn't have the front yard covered with their belongings in trash bags. Like, that's the way that I could relate. I wanted that kind of like consistency. I wanted the security. I wanted the stability. And I would see it by virtues of things like that. Because I couldn't understand like, oh, wow, you have an amazing credit score and you own multiple properties. I had to really like look at it from the form of, wow, he's like clean and his car's full of gas and he has cigarettes and he will willingly buy me a pack. And his wife or girlfriend is eager for his arrival back at home tonight. Those things. So in wanting what they had, I bought into what they suggested, and it was working the 12 steps, and it did everything that addiction didn't do for me. It taught me how to become accountable for my actions, right? And look at the part that I've played in this. And for the first time in my life, stop being the victim in the reality of what my life looked like as a direct result of my addiction, right? So it was no longer why me,
right.
Becoming accountable for my actions. It was like, why the not me, right? And the moment I stopped pointing the finger outward and turned it inward, my life started to get better.
Right.
And again, going back to my step work process, what created me today, I'm in a 90-day inpatient treatment center. Now let's kind of try this for size. I had used from at the end of 16 to 17, I was a full-blown heroin addict, and that ran concurrently, minus 1 year of incarceration and multiple 30-day inpatient attempts at treatment, concurrently in a row is what I'm saying, till 38, right? So my track record does not look like one that someone should believe what I say, ever. I'm in a 90-day inpatient treatment center. On my 90th day, when I was discharged to then transition into my sober living house, where I resided for 1 year, I was on my 8th step. I'd already made my list of amends, right? So that means my very first day in my sober living house is I set out on this journey to make amends. The majority of the people in my life didn't even know I was in treatment. Like, I disappeared for 90 days all the time. That was like my MO. Years, months, decades. I've been...
Right. What about for your mom? Like, did it take her a long time? I mean, she, you guys are very close and she's your biggest cheerleader and supporter. Did it take her a long time?
So So I'm now released from treatment, 91 days. I'm going to set off on this amends to where I would like to believe that people are going to start, stop accusing me of being high if I stay at the grocery store for 20 minutes longer than I said I would, or whatever, like you were with the hair in the bun, if I decide to wear sweatpants on a Monday afternoon, whatever it might look like for whoever's listening. And I said that to my sponsor. I said, what the is going to change? The majority of these people don't even know I've disappeared for treatment for 90 days. It's a blink of an eye. And he said, no, you're missing the point. Again, and I'm not even intentionally going back here, but your behavior has changed. And I said, what do you mean? He said, okay, think about this. When's the last time that you've called someone that you've done wrong out of nowhere and said, hey, I would like to meet up with you. There's some things that I've done in the past that are not okay with me, and I'd like to right my wrongs. What's a time that will work for you that I can make myself available to come meet you? And they give me a time. Okay. So now I've called someone out of nowhere, told them that I've done some things wrong and I'd like to make that right. What's the time that works for your schedule? Not mine. One thing I've done differently. The second thing is I around and I show up. That's not like my previous behavioral pattern. Then I show up and then I go through, I don't apologize. I don't say I'm sorry one time. That has nothing to do with the amends process. And who the will believe me saying I'm sorry? That's how I lived my life for 17 to 38. What I do is I go down the list of things that I've done to you. And then, so that's 3 things that I never do, behaviors that have changed. And then I say, is there anything that I've left out? Now I've apologized. I haven't apologized. I've asked and told you what I'm here to do, which was make what I've done wrong, go through all the things that I said that I've done to you. And then I'm asking if there's anything I forgot, which of course there always is. They then add to that list. And I say, I've been sober now. I'm in a 12-step program, and one of the major steps in my process is to right my wrongs. So I'm here to let you know that what I did, the behaviors that I exhibited, are completely unacceptable. And I'm here to ask you what I can do to make those right with you, right? And then they answer. And then I have to do the craziest thing of all. No matter how I feel about what they suggest I need to do to right these wrongs, I have to follow through. So although it's only been 91 days, I've never exhibited those behavioral patterns in my 38 years of living. And I don't even say I'm sorry. It's such a magical process. Follow through what their suggestions are for me in order to make it better. And the craziest thing, I did my mother first because she's the easiest. She'll forgive me. She never not does. But at that moment, when she accepted my amends, I had shedded that layer of junkie skin that I wore for so long that although in her mind, she might not have thought anything changed, I felt like I was no longer expected to steal her purse. I was no longer expected to steal her car. And that I had shifted. My perspective on life had started to shift. So it was no longer like me trying to figure out why they're so upset or questioning every one of my moves because I took 20 minutes later, or I genuinely am tired today, so I'm yawning, or my eyes are a little bit smaller than usual. I just didn't even look at the world like that anymore.
And that's powerful.
And I didn't. And the beautiful thing about it is I didn't even know I was doing any of this shit. Yeah. It was, life is live forward and learn backwards. And I ended up in a 12-step program because I lacked self-esteem. I knew I lacked self-esteem. You told me I lacked self-esteem. I get it. And if I knew how to acquire it, I would have done it on my own and not ended up in a 12-step fellowship. But again, buying into the process, surrounding myself with genuine people who really wanted me to be the best version of me, no matter what that looked like, whether it's painting walls, flipping burgers, cutting grass, becoming a CEO, whatever it is, they just wanted me to get to that place. And they said, well, you're going to work at this diner. My get well job was working at Marianne's Diner, washing dishes for $6 an hour under the table next to a 14-year-old kid named Brian. That was my get well job. At 91 days, that's where I'm at. And I was not happy with that outcome, right? I believed at the very least I should have been the president of the United States, not washing dishes at Marianne's Diner next to a 14-year-old kid. After being a pretty pronounced guy who did some things in life that people would accredit to success, happiness, and maybe even dream of doing. But I listened to what they said, and the first thing they said is, this position is only temporary. And I didn't know what the next move was going to be, but I believed them because they hadn't lied to me thus far. And they said, what you're going to do is you're going to show up 15 minutes early. You're going to stay 15 minutes late. You're going to take pride in washing these dishes. And I did that. And I started to become self-sufficient. And for the first time in my life, I was paying my own way through society. And I started paying my own $165 a week in rent. Then I started paying bi-weekly. Then I started buying my own groceries. And I smoked at the time, so I'd buy my own cigarettes. I'd buy my own bus pass without any reliance on any other person, which was very different for me. And through doing those esteemable acts, one day out of nowhere, I just noticed that I held my head up a little bit higher, and I looked at you in your eyes, and I spoke with conviction, and I wasn't in fear of what your thought of me was going to be once I left this room. So that's been sobriety as a whole. It's backdoored its way into me. The moment because we don't end up here because we took the short bus to school. Right. We end up here because we're too smart for our own good. And if I'm not vigilant of the reality of the disease that I've been diagnosed with, I'll outthink myself right out of this chair.
Yeah, exactly. For people that are fresh in recovery, because the first thing they have is regret.
Yeah.
Do you have regret?
Welcome.
Being an addict.
It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Mm-hmm. It is the best thing that's ever happened to me. The worst thing that ever happened to me was suffering with this thing called addiction for so long, battling with it in my mind and just kind of dipping my toe in the shallow end to see how the temperatures of recovery felt. Mm-hmm. That was the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. The best thing that ever happened to me was the moment that I just A, burnt everything down, and B, admitted to myself that I truly had a problem that I could no longer control and definitely not get out of on my own. Mm-hmm. And just jumped into that deep end and like on 5-alarm fire head first into recovery. That was the best thing that ever happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And I feel like it's important that we shared that it's okay to be acceptance, because I say the same thing. You know, where I am today, I don't regret it. I regret who I've hurt in the process, you know?
But then even then, because I used to say that, mm-hmm. and I really believe that. But truth of the matter is, if I didn't hurt those people that I cared about so much, would I have felt some repercussions from my actions that led to me admitting that I don't know?
Absolutely.
So it depends on how deep you want to go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
But
very true.
If anybody would have robbed me of my process, if anyone would have allowed me to have one less night sleeping on the streets, mm-hmm. one less man blowing me for a bag of heroin, mm-hmm. like legit, like I'll get really graphic with it. Like if anyone would have denied me a day, a night of that life, mm-hmm. it's very true that like it might not have created this outcome. Right.
And I agree with that. You know, I definitely have made amends with myself with a lot of the things that I did during my process. And, you know, there's been forgiveness, and I've made that with my family, but there's still those little things, you know, I'll never forget. And it's like, I apologize to my mom over and over,
sure.
But you know, a ring that my dad had gotten her, and I pawned it for $20.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you make amends, but you still look back and it's like, well, if I could just find that damn ring anywhere in the world, I would pay endless amounts of money to get that back, because you can't get certain things back that you've done in your addiction, things like that. Am I forgiven for it?
For sure.
Absolutely. Do I forgive myself? Yes, because those things are what I know I never want to go through again, you know, but you can't get it back. And sometimes that's really, really hard. And those are the things I struggle with. Maybe that one just in particular the most.
Well, clearly, you didn't tell me about anything else but the ring story. So yes, that's the one that's jarring for you.
I think my grandpa forgives me with the tools, and
I get it.
You know, things like that. I mean, those are little things that aren't sentimental. You know, it's like, it's tools. You go buy new tools, you know.
But that's the beautiful thing about this, right? Like I can't relate to that story. And I promise you, and for anyone that's listening or watching, the specifics of all of our stories will absolutely vary. There are no two that are the same. Right. I can't share that with you. I didn't buy that. I didn't.
Right.
But what I promise you is that the end results of all of us are the exact same. Mm-hmm. We end up in this place, A, that we don't know how we got to, B, that we can't get out of on our own. We're disconnected, disassociated, isolated, depressed, homicidal, suicidal, you know, and that's where it takes us. So I don't want anyone that's listening to this to think, well, I didn't do that. I didn't make it there. My story doesn't equate to hers, and rightfully so. None of ours do.
Right. It's like I'm not injecting heroin. I'm just smoking it type deal.
Yeah. So if you're anything like me, right, this is what maybe someone out there can relate to, is I would sit listening to whoever and I'd say, well, but I didn't steal my grandfather's ring. I didn't let a man blow me for heroin. So I clearly am not that bad. So if you can relate to that, then maybe there's some more similarities than differences. But our alcoholism is so powerful that it will allow us to only focus on the differences, not the similarities.
Right. Which is so true. It's so true. And
so it's good that you shared that, and I can't relate to it. It's good for the listeners or the viewers to see that.
And it's true. And trying to find forgiveness in yourself. And that's okay. I mean, we're human, and I can sit here and honestly, and I feel like that's one of the biggest gains that I've had is that I am okay with being authentically myself. That's another thing. And when I first went through the process, I remember I don't want anybody to know. I don't want anybody, and you've been to numerous treatment programs, my story is different, but we were both going to end up in the same place if we didn't get better.
100%.
And look at, we're both in the same place.
Yeah.
Because we've recovered too.
Absolutely.
But don't tell anybody. I don't want anyone to know.
Dark, shameful, hidden place that we at one point in time hoped would remain locked forever.
Right. And now this is all I do is talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm able to be myself. And some people are like, geez, that's harsh or that's crazy. But a lot of times it's helping a lot of people that are going through similar situations, and I feel nobody should be judging that person or that addict. And, to me, I look at them, shame on you. If you are, you better hope that your child or your loved one doesn't become an addict, because no one's handed a manual of what to do if they, and so many people think they have it figured out if they haven't been through the process. And that part, it gets frustrating because we're trying to speak out on it. Times have changed. I mean, there's social media now. There's so much going on. There's so much influence and pressure. And I feel like we're having to change. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. Things are different today than they were before. What used to be tough love maybe really worked well for someone, and now it's like tough love. We need to do everything that they can if they're wanting help. Things are different. It's not the same as it used to be. We have to stay in tune with that, which is, I love that you do speaking engagements and you're, here today so we can speak to another school and speak to these students, because I'm convinced that with how bad things are getting, we have to do something before it gets to that point. We have to prevent it before the addiction hits. And speaking to our youth and speaking to these kids and educating them, sharing our story and being vulnerable and authentic, I feel hopefully is going to make a difference in that one kid, even if it's just one out of the whole school who chooses not to pick up a substance.
You could change the whole narrative. I work with the DEA, right? And the guy who's telling you a lot of the deep, dark things that I've done, right, is now partner with the DEA. And they came to me and they said, look, we understand that we can no longer arrest our way out of this problem. It's getting much bigger than we could have ever unfortunately thought of and cannot contain. So we need to figure out a different approach. And they do this thing called the Opioid Summit, the 360-degree Opioid Summit. And they do it all over. And I'm like the keynote speaker at these events for a lot of them. And they said recently at one of the events I was at, they said, at one point in time, we were interviewing Pablo Escobar. And we said to Pablo, how do we stop the supply of narcotics coming in? How do we stop it? And Pablo looked at him and he said, he didn't even bat an eye. Without second thought, he said, well, you stop the supply. You stop the demand. How do you stop the supply? By stopping the demand. And I think that's largely in part why they came to someone such as myself, because if you take out the Pablo, there's 50 more Pablos that will take his position. If you take out the henchmen, the whoever, there's 50 more of them that will take that spot in the blink of an eye. You or I are a prime example of how you stop the supply, right? For the majority of my life, it consisted of me finding ways and means to come up with as much money possible to ingest as much drinks or drugs as possible. Same with you, right? I get sober, I help someone. You get sober, you help someone. 2 turn into 4, 4 turn into 8, 8 turn into 16. And before you know it, right, the narrative's changing to create a better outcome, because there's not so much of a demand just by you and I getting sober, that the supply is going to start to lessen. Right. So in understanding that, I have been blessed with a pretty big platform. And what I do today is use my platforms that reach a couple million in total to deliver my message in a form of attraction rather than promotion, right? Because ultimately the demographic, the clientele that we deal with, the wheelhouse that we're working with is defiant by nature. They hate authority and they refuse to conform, right? So I kind of give my message to them in a way, hopefully, that they find so appealing, it becomes their idea to want to buy in to what we're talking about, right? And again, all perspective, looking at the fight that we're fighting, the war that by most standards we are not winning, right? The analytics, the data collected from all these studies all over the world state that we are losing. And that's right? If you're looking at the numbers, statistics state theoretical evidence dictates that you and I, Cheree, are to be high or dead right now. The fact that we're not is miraculous, and B, it defies logic, right? But if you look at these numbers collected, it states that we're losing. But go ask my mother, who had bought me a plot 12 years ago, because she was in fear that if she died, who would take care of me? Go ask her if we are fighting an unwinning battle. And I promise you, she f***ing disagrees. So going back, speaking to this youth can really change the narrative, will create a better outcome by way of, or virtue of someone who's coming in there speaking with them, not to them or at them, not from an authoritative place of like, I'm here to tell you what the your life's going to look like if you do or do not listen to me. That's not what I'm doing, man.
Right. Exactly. And I do love that.
Make it appealing. Make it desirable.
Well, and that's the thing with mental health.
Make me want to engage.
Now, it's before I used to look at when someone said mental health, I thought of instant illness.
Sure.
I thought of somebody that was talking to themselves on the streets, Now they're making it, like you said, make it appealing. And I feel like in the past decade has been more popular talking about mental health and awareness and how to feed your brain. I mean, fitness and health has been around for years, decades and decades, where mental health is newer. Now it's how to meditate, how to, and those are things that I feel we need to be able to incorporate in our schools and our educational system, because it's important for these kids to be able to have coping skills that are not self-medicating.
I literally just came back from a spiritual retreat. I was in Mammoth doing that before I got here. I don't trust anyone who doesn't seek therapy, right? Like, I don't trust anyone who doesn't have some form of outside help in their day-to-day life. And the reality is, people aren't really suffering in silence anymore, because there's people such as us who go out and let people know that it's okay to not be okay. Because for so long, I just kind of roamed through life trying to figure this out, not wanting to share with anybody that I had a problem. Right. And then what happened was, for so long, I just wanted to make sure that no one knew I had a problem. Did the best to keep it under wraps. And then I go to treatment, and what I learned is that, like, unbeknownst to me, everyone in the world knew that I had a problem but me, right? Complete opposite. And then I go to ask for help, and no longer suffer in silence. I can't, please help. And what they did was they uncovered the problem in order for me to discover the problem, so I could then have hope to recover from the problem. But I was ignorant. I had no idea, because no one had let me know what was really going on. So of course I kept making this thing a wash, rinse, repeat. Why wouldn't I have? I wasn't armed with the facts.
Now,
or understanding.
Right. And how's your relationship? I mean, you've always had a good relationship with your mom. Do you feel your relationship with her has changed drastically? Not much at all since you've
Everything in my life has gotten better. Literally everything. And you can use your imagination, and every aspect of my life, my world has gotten better. physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, sexually. Like, I'm just going to throw it all out there because something is going to land with somebody to be like, oh, I don't give a what it is that makes you want to get sober. I don't care what I have to say to make you buy into it. I don't care what you find yourself going to a treatment center or a meeting for. I don't care if it's through bankruptcy, through divorce, through death, through violation, through parole. I don't care what it is that gets you there. All I care about is what I can say to keep you there, right? At 45 years old, I am in the best shape of my life in every area of my life, and it's as a direct result of being a raging drug addict and alcoholic that was willing to finally admit complete defeat. And that moment that I admitted complete defeat was the exact second I secured the ultimate victory. But I couldn't see that because I possessed that job that consisted of knowing everything, right? And you told me what I should do to save my life, and I told you I should off. And then walking into that 13th treatment center in a place where the pain became so unbearable, I was then like willing to conceive, you know what I do know is that I don't know. And my very best thinking for me placed me in a basement of a Catholic Charities rehab that cost me $2 to get into with a 19-year-old tech as he's thumbing through these boxes looking for used underwear for me to wear. That's the best I could come up with. And it was that realization that I thought at that moment in time was the worst day of my life was actually shifting up to be the best day of my life. And looking back, absolutely by far was the best day that's ever been given to me. And I've had some pretty rad days throughout my career.
Absolutely.
So.
And I agree with that. I mean, what I thought was the worst day of my life, I will talk about that. It was absolutely the best. Getting arrested and having to detox in that jail and try to figure out how to, make the food taste better. I mean, it was just an unrealistic experience. Like, how the did I get here? Yeah. This is crazy. Yeah. But I'm thankful for it every single day. And at times I still, wish that there were more legal consequences. I feel like it helps some, may not help everyone. A lot of people have no fear of jail. They find it as a vacation. It's a break, time to chill out a little bit.
We become institutionalized. I can conform really well in uncomfortable places. That's actually where I dwelled for the majority of my life. It's this place that I have a problem with. Freedom, right? Choice. Privacy. That's the things I have problems with because, like, what do I do with me when I'm left with me by myself, looking at only myself without any distractions? Yeah.
Do you feel that a lot has to do, if you look back on your journey and where it started, do you look back now and feel that there's a lot of trauma involved, choice? I hear a lot of people say different things. I used because I thought it was fun. The time I used because I had a lot of trauma. And sometimes I don't figure that out until years and years into the recovery of what could have been different.
Yeah. My story is I believe I was genetically predisposed. My father was an addict. His father was an addict. My mother, my brother, my sister, both of which are by a different man, they have no issue at all. That paired with the fact that I was just kind of being shaped and molded into potentially my father. I remember as a kid, I smoked herb for the first time from some that I stole from him. He rode with the Hells Angels. He was like a biker guy, and he was always in and out of prisons, and we'd go visit, and my grandmother and I. So I was kind of molded. He would drive me with him in the car as he would go conduct his business and drop off stuff to people and places and establishments, and a lot of which were like strip joints. So I was kind of raised in that culture. I remember being a child left at the bar, and he was in the back conducting business, and two dancing women like shot me at the bar, set me at the bar, and they would pour shots of ginger ale and Coca-Cola into the shot glasses, and I would do them, and they would applaud. My father would give me that look of approval. That kind of carried on, and ironically enough, the person that I despised and hated the most in life was the very same man I had become, my father, which was, a very humbling thing, because later on in my life, the guy that I just could not stand, I was like, how dare I? Because I became him, and I got right-sized really quick. And the truth of the matter is, we're all sick people in our own way, suffering with our own sickness. And he did the best that he could with what he had, and it took me to become him, to accept his, I don't want to say faults, just him as a human being. And that's the thing, we're human beings, not human doings. And this thing does not come with an instruction manual. My mother didn't have an instruction manual. My father didn't. Their mother and father didn't. We're trying to do this together, hopefully with the best intentions, for the best outcome. And that's just where we're at. So yeah, that's why I believed I was picked to go on this journey that I found myself on, that ultimately led to the man that I am today, who's devoted my life in every aspect of it to helping those who are where I once was.
Right.
I believe I was assigned this role. Today, tomorrow it could completely change.
Yeah.
But today, at this moment, this is where I'm supposed to be. And that was the exact road that I was meant to go down. And if anyone would have robbed me of that journey, I wouldn't be the child of God that I am today.
Right.
So how dare my feeble-minded self think that I know what God's will is? Off for me. Right. And acceptance is the answer to all. So who am I? Where's my spirituality if I judge your spirituality?
Right.
I was in prison. I've fasted with the Muslims. Right. I've went to the Holy Mountain. I went to Mount Athos in Greece, where I locked myself in monasteries and chanted from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. There's only men that are allowed there. I've been baptized. I'm down for any kind of spiritual experience. Who am I to say I haven't figured out?
Right. Well, Brandon Novak, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
It always is, girl. I look for an excuse to connect with you as much as possible.
Yeah, well, I'm thankful for our friendship dearly. And before we close out, if there's any words or any phrases or anything that you hold on to when times get tough, what is that?
I hate to break it to you, but I'm not going to say anything that I'm sure that you or the viewers haven't heard a billion times. But it's these cliché-ish, slogans that I really live my life by. And it's like, rejection is God's protection. Things don't happen to us, but for us. Yeah, those are the two that really I say to myself on a daily basis, because believe it or not, as much as I may come off as a guy who has it put together and really has a clear understanding on life, things don't go the way I wish they would a lot. And thank God for that.
Yeah.
Thank God, and I'm not God, because I will it up.
Yeah.
And I have to tell myself that often. And yeah. Everything is exactly as it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right now at this moment. Good, bad, or indifferent.
I agree with that. 100%.
Thank God for the process. Thank God for the ability to feel. You just got to lean into it. And that's where I'm at this day on my journey. Again, tomorrow could be completely different. Is forgiving myself.
Yeah.
Like I hate to offend anybody out there, but it's not my business if you forgive me for anything I've done. It doesn't really matter. As long as I forgive myself, that's where the real peace, freedom, and connection with my higher power come from.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
thank you. I appreciate you.
I love you, girl.
Love you.